If we didn't do that, we would still be in caves. It was saying, hey, we want more. We want a nice house. We want a big house. We want a building. We want to get to the sky. We want to get to the moon. And now we want to get to Mars. I mean, I love all of that. So fine. I'm not dissing that. Don't think that is going to make you happy. Now, that might sound like some sort of little spiritual homily, money doesn't make you happy, whatever. This isn't a spiritual homily, my friends. Not that I mind spiritual homilies. That's not it. It is an absolute research scientific fact. It's why I give you a way to boost your happiness more than winning the lottery. If you just won the lottery, I couldn't compete with that. 6 months later, most people who win the lottery go back to the same emotional state they were in before they won the lottery.
Hello and welcome to the Real Success Show. I'm your host, Candice Mama. Today we speak to someone that I have deep admiration for because he is a personal life transformer. He has been in the industry for over 20 years and he is now getting his doctorate in human psychology. The one and only Justin Cohen. If you are feeling stuck, if you're feeling mental health is getting you down, then this is the conversation you have to listen to. But before we jump in, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. If you like this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that more people will find us. Now, without further ado, here's Justin Cohen. Thank you so much for being on the Real Success Show.
Great to be here, Cand.
So I want to have full disclosure to the audience and say that I have known Justin for, I think it's over 6 years now. So anytime we get to talk, Just, it is just like a privilege for me because you are one of the wisest people I know.
Well, the feeling is absolutely mutual. So I don't know how we're going to fit this into 60 minutes, but I'm not going to try. That's your job.
Challenge accepted. But Justin, for people out there who may not know who you are, how do you describe yourself?
As the guy who wrote the book Pitch to Win, I always say your pitch is 100% determined by who you are pitching. And, it's not that I have a pitch here today. I know we're just having an open conversation, but in some way, whenever we talk to anyone, we're pitching them ideas. We're pitching them a perspective on the world. As I always say, Nelson Mandela and Mother Teresa were great pitch people because they were able to get a lot of people behind their incredible vision. So I'll lead you into a little secret, something that I don't usually tell. But I certainly don't tell people who are about to employ me for a corporate conference, which is where I do most of my work. So most of my paid work is organizations, right? You bring me in for an annual conference or some sort of motivational session or leadership, sales or customer service session. And I've really just labeled how I would pitch to them. They are looking for some way to boost their bottom line, right? Which has got to be about leadership or sales or service. What I don't tell them is what I'll tell you, what I do, personal development. That's what I do. But most people, most organizations are not buying personal development. And the truth is, Ken, most people are not buying personal development. I mean, even the people who are watching this right now are probably not going, ooh, where can I buy some personal development today? Right? What they're probably doing is saying, where can I learn to lose weight today? Or where can I learn to create wealth today? Or where can I learn to have more love in my life today? Or how can I find the love of my life or turn the one that I'm with into the love of my life, right? People are looking for a result. That's what they're really after. Now, I don't focus on a single result because in my experience, the principles that I teach are actually necessary for whatever goal it is that you want to achieve, whether that is an organizational goal, say increasing your sales or customer service, or a personal goal, such as finding the love of your life or creating wealth or starting that business. The basic principles are actually the same.
Oh, I love that, Jess. And I love that you spoke about pitch to win. And, we're going to get into everything else you just unpacked. But for people out there who are thinking about pitching, I mean, some words come to mind, right? Sales. That's what we think. We're like, I need a pitch to get someone to buy a product. But you also said we're always pitching ourselves. So what is the best way to pitch yourself? Should you be looking for a job, a romantic partner, whatever it may be?
Yeah. So people a lot of people will say things like, I hate selling, or, I'm not a salesperson. And I think the first thing is to realize that we're all in sales. We are all in sales. From the first time that we screamed our head off as a little baby, what were we doing? We were selling our mother our silence for her milky breast. For men, that continues long into adulthood. So we're always pitching. As I say, even if it's not a product, a service, or yourself for a job, or yourself for that relationship, it's your ideas. In some ways, you and I are pitching ideas to one another, right now. So I think the first thing to realize is that we all do this. And when people say that I hate selling, what they're actually saying is, I hate rejection. Nobody hates selling when they get the deal. Nobody hates selling when they convince somebody of their idea. Nobody hates selling when they get the job. What they hate is putting themselves on the line. And what I always say is, we got to be rejection specialists, because you're going to get rejected far more often than you get accepted. And the biggest failures never fail. They never fail. They sit on the sidelines, telling you why it's not going to work. And they're always right, because you can't get on score a goal if you don't get on the field. So we've got to be willing to put ourselves out there on the field, and we've got to be willing to lose. And, I joke, my book Pitch to Win should really be called Pitch to Lose, and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose 12 times before you win, because it's about 12 exposures to a new product, service, or person before people feel comfortable enough to buy. That's what the research tells us, 12 exposures. You are guilty until proven innocent. Yeah. And that's because we all have something called the stranger syndrome. We're inherently skeptical of new product, services, or things, because think of your caveman ancestors. The first time she saw those delicious looking red berries, would it have been a good idea to eat them? No, because they could be poisonous. They could kill her, right? So first, you see how the berries, work out with the dog, with that uncle you don't like so much, and then you'll try them yourself. So really, we have a very high threat detection system in the brain, where we're looking for threat more than reward, because to the brain, a reward's nice, but a threat could kill us, right? So if you land up taking on something new that doesn't work out, to the caveman brain, and we've all got the same caveman brain, that's an existential threat. So that's why we've got to be resilient. We've got to be willing to fail, because you are going to fail and you are going to get rejected more often. Yeah, but that's the only way to finally get what it is that you're after.
Oh, so what I'm hearing you say is getting comfortable with yourself enough to know that after all these rejections, you just have to stand up again, and you just have to try again. Is that what you're saying, Jess?
Yeah, and this is, the Buddhists like to say, fall down 8 times, get up 9. And I was sharing that with a friend of mine's son, and he said, but Justin, why not fall down 10 times, get up 11? And that's it. We got to, I know, Ken, and I know this is true for you. It's certainly true for me. It's true for anyone that I know is successful. We have a lot of failures, right? If I to quantify the failures that I've had over the past couple of years, I was trying to do it the other day, and I just kind of, lost count. I couldn't, because so many things that you try don't work, but those are the lessons, right? Hence the Dalai Lama, when you lose, don't lose the lesson, right? Those are the lessons. It's being willing to put yourself out there. And I there's a question, I like to ask when I'm faced with adversity, difficulty, challenges, what's good about this? And, one thing I love about rejection is that, certainly rejection gets you closer to success, right? We know that, if you learn the lessons and so on, but also I kind of like the humility that comes with it, that's just a reminder that you're not perfect. You're not, I'm all for self-love, don't get me wrong, but self-love isn't about, there's a difference between self-love and narcissism. And I like to be reminded that I'm fallible, and I like to be reminded that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And that might sound a little disingenuous. I don't know if I always liked it. I think I actually hated it for a long time. But I think what I realized was that as long as I hated it, I was going to be in suffering a lot, because I got rejected a lot. So now I've reframed it, and I've gone, great. Rejection means I'm putting myself out there. Rejection means I'm being courageous. Rejection means I'm trying stuff. Rejection means I'm learning, right? So I've changed my whole meaning. I've changed my whole mindset around rejection. So I can honestly say to you, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it doesn't sting, I'm not saying it doesn't stand. I'm not saying it doesn't raise my heart rate. I'm not saying that, it's always a pleasant feeling, but that sort of the pain has a certain pleasure in it. The pleasure of knowing that I'm putting myself out there, the pleasure of knowing, that this is going to keep me humble, because that's a value of mine.
Yeah, wow. And, just as we're speaking about, failures, and we're speaking about things, not going your way, we have come out of an interesting, I'm saying come out of because I'm an optimist, but the most interesting 2 years that I think our generation of human beings has ever experienced. And that has caused a lot of mental fragility. A lot of people are feeling that, mentally they're incapable of moving forward, that they're incapable of facing another day, and every day they wake up is actually a fight to stay alive. And I know that you are studying this at this time, but you've studied it over your career. And so when people are going through those mental hurdles, what should they be looking at? What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, well, Ken, this is certainly probably my greatest passion. I studied psychology. I have a postgraduate degree in psychology, and I'm doing my doctorate at the moment in human transformation at Middlesex in London. So it might seem like a little bit of a shift. We're talking about pitch to win, and now we're going to be talking about mental health. But remember, there are foundational principles that are important to understand. In fact, even a little bridge here for us is like, when it comes to pitching, you've got to be able to deal with rejection. Well, guess what? When it comes to your mental health, you've got to be able to deal with rejection, right? When it comes to being a great entrepreneur, there's some basic mental characteristics that are really helpful. And those happen to be mental characteristics that are really helpful to your mental health. So again, I'm very broad in my offering, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because my intention actually is to start to narrow focus even more on what I like to call mental wealth. Because we can call it mental health, and mental health is really important, and I'm glad that it's become such a prominent topic in the world today. But I do think mental health has a connotation of dis-ease, of disorder. And so I'm just flipping the script here, and saying, well, instead of focusing, on what's wrong, we're going to focus on what we really all want, right? Which is wealth. And I don't mean monetary wealth, although it so happens that when you get your mental wealth right, you're far more likely to create monetary wealth. But the idea is that your true wealth is your mental capacity, is your mental ability, is your ability to be happy, quite frankly, to overcome difficulty, to deal with distress, to bounce back, right? Resilience. So this is really important. And I think it has come more to the fore now with the pandemic, that we've definitely seen far greater levels of struggle there. But quite frankly, we didn't need this pandemic to highlight the challenges that many people are facing. What we've seen over the past 20 years is a significant increase in all mental illness, particularly anxiety and depression. And, just the other day, somebody was saying to me, Justin, isn't it just because, the millennials and the Gen Zs are just, much more open to talking about their mental issues? I mean, I certainly, when I was a kid, I didn't even know if we really had a word for anxiety. I guess we probably did. It was a very underused word. And certainly nobody would have said, I've been struggling with anxiety or depression for that matter. But what people are saying is, well, is it just because we weren't talking about it? Now people are talking about it, so now it looks like it's increased. And I wish that was the case. I wish that was the case. The reason we know that's not the case is because if we look at suicide stats, right? If you're committing suicide, you almost certainly are struggling with very high levels of anxiety and depression. We've seen them increase from 2000 to 2016, right? So that's well before the pandemic, by 30%, overall. And even more shocking, for women and girls, by 50%. And we can discuss that gender difference if we have the time, but that tells us that we have an issue that is much bigger than this pandemic. Now, in terms of the causes of that, that's complex. It seems that as much as I love social media has a dark side. And part of it is comparing yourself to other people, to other people's idealized versions of themselves, because most of what you're seeing up there is not even real on Facebook and Instasham. Of course, some of it can be real, and it provides a lot of good too. But particularly with young people whose sense of self is not fully formulated, and they get to see these idealized versions, compare themselves, and feel inferior. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons for anxiety and depression is self-esteem. Is really just not valuing yourself. But what it also tells us is that increases in material well-being, and we've seen significant increases. People, when you ask people if the world is getting better, they usually say no. And I know right now, I'm not sure where we'll be when this airs, but right now, we face an absolute tragedy in Europe. Well, tragedies also have their opportunities, and I think this might be the opportunity of a very significant opportunity to test and to hopefully show the triumph of democracy, because that's really what we're seeing in the world today. It's between Vladimir Putin's kleptocratic autocracy and democracy and free speech, and that's what this war is all about. This is why what's going on in Ukraine is so important. But even with us being on I don't want to call it the brink of World War III, because I don't think it is, but it certainly brings us closer than we've ever been before. Overall, as long as a nuke doesn't go off, this is we still see radical improvements, reductions in poverty, increases in reductions in childhood mortality, increases in longevity, and war. Yes, I mean the reason that what's going on in Ukraine is so disturbing to us all is because we have not had a major international war since World War II. Now, prior to that, you had wars all the time. Wars were just, that wasn't news. The world was always at war. So we've seen massive reductions in war. And even, this war, which is absolutely tragic, we're still not seeing the levels of destruction that you see in most wars. So we've seen these increases in material well-being, and yet we've seen decreases in emotional well-being. And what that tells us is that what's going on out there is a lot less important to our emotional well-being than what's going on in here. And, again, that might sound like a little crazy, like, dude, okay, go hang out in Ukraine and tell me it's not important what's going on out there. Of course, external circumstances have an impact. If you are undergoing abuse, if you are undergoing extreme violence, or if you're in a war zone, yes, I mean, that's, that's devastating. So I'm not talking about those absolutely tragic circumstances. I'm just talking about general levels of material well-being don't correlate with increases of emotional well-being. And what's interesting, Ken, is that what we know is that in times of war, actually, yes, right now in Ukraine, there's a lot of fear. There's no doubt a lot of grief as people are losing loved ones. And by the way, that's true of Russia as well. Last count, it looks like 10,000 Russians have been killed, which is unbelievable, bearing in mind that in the entire Iraq war, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 Americans have been killed over a 20-year period. So you're literally seeing Russians going out and being used as cannon fodder. But that's what happens when you're part of a kleptocratic autocracy, which doesn't really care about its people. Like really just Vladimir Putin really just cares about one person. But what we do know is that in times of war, we actually have low levels of anxiety. Now you might say, whoa, hold on, I don't get that. How can you have a low level anxiety in wartime? Come on, surely that's when you must be your most anxious. No, because here's the difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is a response to real threat. So there's a lot of fear in Ukraine. There is a bomb coming, somebody's been hurt, I could be hurt. That's fear, that's real, and that's important. They need to experience fear. If they didn't, they'd just lie in their beds waiting for it to happen. That fear is motivating them to fight. That fear is motivating to shoot down Russian planes, to shoot down those tanks. That fear is great. That fear is what is right now totally surpassing all expectations of what Ukraine was going to do. People thought Ukraine was going to roll over in days. No, it's the fear that is motivated, not just fear, absolutely their commitment to their homeland and so on, but that's very important, right? Anxiety is a response to perceived threat, yeah? Perceived, it's not actually a real threat. That's why anxiety disorders can be to things that are not actually threatening, right? Like health anxiety when you don't actually have anything that's physically wrong with you, or you notice you can really be anxious about anything. You can be anxious about not finding the love of your life. You can be anxious when you found the love of your life about losing the love of your life. You can be anxious about losing your job, right? Even when you have a job, that's a perceived it's a perceived threat. So what happens in times of war when there's an external threat is it actually reduces our perception of the perceived threat that is unrooted to any external circumstance, and then depression, interestingly, is low as well, because depression also seems to be related to rumination, where you just sit, thinking about negative events, analyzing their causes and consequences. Well, when you're in a war zone, you don't have time to sit and think. You are out there dealing with reality. And so that's why you'll often see, and you see this with the Ukrainians, it's quite beautiful to see, you can see it epitomized in Zelensky, and, you might say, yeah, well, he's the leader, he's got it good. Well, no, actually, Zelensky knows, and the West knows, that he could be taken out at any moment. That bomb could take him out. But if you look at him and you look at his team, and there's some fear there, but there's focus, there's excitement, there's purpose, there's mission. I mean, there's no depression there, right? There is no anxiety there. There's no sort of worrying about, perceived threats. There's dealing with real threats. And so, it's a reminder to us that mental health is largely an inside job. Now, again, of course, if you've had a trauma, you have a greater chance of developing mental health. But here's what's so extraordinary is that, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, the number one factor is not the size of the trauma. That's not it. The number one factor is if you are big on rumination, if you're somebody who overthinks things, and if you ever find yourself, in this sort of like circles of, compulsive kind of circular thinking where, the thinking doesn't really get you anywhere, but you just sort of stay stuck in it. That actually is a bigger determinant of getting a PTSD. So it's internal. And so, yeah, wow, this was a long way to answer your question, Ken. But yeah, I feel really passionate about this, and I see the next leg of my career as really focusing on what I like to call mental wealth.
No, I love the extended, answer, just because there was a saying that came to mind, and because I read so many historical books, I can't tell you where it came from, but it is basically with nothing to fight for, the people no longer had anything to live for. And so as you were speaking about, people's this igniting sense of, being energized by fighting for something, fighting for an ideal. And when I tie it into today's society, where some people aren't facing conflict, where people are in, as you said, more comfortable lives, right? Is it because there's nothing for them to fight for at this point that causes the rumination? Is it the lack of purpose? Could it be lack of direction? Like, what causes us to stay in this rumination state?
Yeah, sure. A few things there, and thank you for that quote. I absolutely love that. I know a good quote when I steal one. With nothing to fight for, there's nothing to live for. Is that it?
With nothing to fight for, the people that had nothing to live for.
People had nothing to live for. I was just doing a session earlier for one of the big banks. I do a presentation called Bounce Forward Better on the 5 P's to bouncing forward. And one of the P's is purpose. And for the first time, I actually linked purpose to solving a challenge. So they started off the session and everybody had to come up with a particular challenge, personal, business, whatever it was. And what occurred to me actually in the preparation that I was doing for the session is that, whatever challenge you've got in your life right now, and we've all got a challenge, right? You're either in a problem, emerging from a problem, or about to get into a problem, right? That's what life is. Life is, if you've got a problem, congratulations, you're alive. But, if you look at your problem, personal, business, financial, relation, whatever it is, and you kind of go, oh gosh, that's just an awful problem that shouldn't be here. And I don't know why it's here. And it's so unfair and it's so awful and right? And I actually had one of those yesterday. Something happened, a business issue where somebody let me down with regards to something which could end up becoming a 20,000 Rand mistake, right? And that then became my problem. Now, if I just think about that as a problem, it's just, yeah, right. It's not great. I mean, yes, I'll get into action mode and I'll sort it out and I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with. But if I link that problem to my purpose, it really does change, because, my purpose is I equip and inspire people and organizations to realize their potential. Now, if I see that problem, that solving that problem would enable me to fulfill my purpose, I become actually far more fired up and motivated, right? If I see that problem, if I see solving the problem as demonstrating my purpose, right? If I can solve this problem, I demonstrate to others, the ability to equip them to realize potential, because solving problems is necessary to realizing potential. The moment I link my purpose to it became welcome, actually, rather. So instead of resisting it, I was welcoming it, right? The idea that, these challenges are not sent to obstruct, but to instruct, right? They're not on the way, they or rather not in the way, they're on the way, right? But those are, cute sayings, and I love them, but I could feel that when I linked it to the purpose. And this is Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor. He said he has a why to live can be almost anyhow. You will, if you've got a powerful reason, you will do whatever you need to. And that's what we're seeing in Ukraine. Now, very interesting, look at the difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians. The Russians are dropping like flies. And that's maybe not a great metaphor. And I don't mean that with disrespect to the Russians. I just mean it because the truth is most of these Russian soldiers are just kids, man, who have been co-opted into a war that they never chose. But the reason that they are dropping is because there's no motivation. It's like, what are we doing here? The Ukrainians are our brothers, they're our sisters. Like, we don't want to be here. Why am I here, right? So you don't see the motivation. You don't see the fight. There is no fight. There is no why. There's no why for the Russians. That's what's going on here. There is no damn why. The only why is kleptocratic Vladimir Putin's bank accounts and some weird fucked up desire, because you've got the biggest landmass in the world. Russia, by the way, biggest landmass in the world, is not enough, because when you're that flippin' greedy, it's never enough. You've got the biggest country in the world. It's not enough. It just shows you, right, the craziness. I mean, this man is, talk about, mental health, man. There is seriously something wrong with you. If you then, I know there's more complexity here, and there's NATO, and there's buffer zones, and there's neutrality, but basically what there is this absolute rampant greed. Yeah. I see to keep getting back on this, don't I? It's kind of it's ranking for me for a moment. So I guess it's coming back in again. So let me bring this home, which is the Russian, other than Putin and his cronies and his oligarchs and the people who actually benefit from this terribly corrupt system. Your average Russian soldier does not have a why. He does not have a why. The Ukrainians, with a tenth of the manpower, a tenth of the airplanes, they're an absolute fraction, are kicking ass. Why? Because they got a why. They got a why. So if you ever find yourself floundering, it's because you've lost sense of that mission, that purpose, of why you're here. What is the difference that you make? Ukrainians know they're fighting for their brothers and sisters. They are fighting for the next generation, man. They're fighting for history here. They got a big why. Watch that why kick Russia in the ass. That's what we're seeing.
And just to bring it back to that why, it's for me, it's been interesting because I'm living in South Africa and so are you right now. And over the past probably month or two, there've been more celebrity suicides than I've seen in a very long time. And so whether these are like hip hop celebrities, or we've had a lot of American suicides, celebrities in the past, 2 months. And to me, it's like when we use the term celebrity, right? We identify that with a sense of having made it. Like you've got the money, you've got the stardom, you've got the fans, you've got everything that people assume is going to rescue them from the feeling that they have within. And sometimes it's that why they're like, I just need to fight for this until I become a star. I just need to fight for this until I get this. Then they attain it and they're still fighting. So what causes that? What is it that we are not fixing within ourselves that causes us to still feel so self-destructive or so isolated that we still don't find that reprieve?
I think it's a great point, and it's a great question. I think we labor under the myth that when we get the guy or the girl, when we get the cash, when we get the business, when we get that job, then we will be happy. It's actually one of the reasons, Ken, why I've shifted, because that's what I was always selling. For most of my career, that's what I've sold. That these are the principles to get what you want, and that's cool. I mean, I still back that. I still back creating the life that you want. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I call it the magic of manifestation, and I love our ability to get what we want. And that's part of the game of life. It's wonderful. But as I always like to say, the two great skills of life is, number one, getting what you want, and number two, dealing with not getting what you want. Because I think even more often than getting what you want, you're not going to get what you want. Remember, if we know that it takes 12 rejections before you finally get the deal, well, that's kind of in life in general. With single wives on Mnet, I mean, this really was impressed, upon me. I mean, most of the dates that you go on are not going to be great dates. The truth is, if you only had to go on one date to find the love of your life, you'd only ever go on one date, right? So clearly, most dates are not going to be as great. I still think you can have fun with them. I don't think it has to lead to marriage and kids for to have not been a great date, but most attempts are not going to give you what you want, right? So clearly dealing with not getting what you want is really critical part of this equation. But here's the thing, the getting what you want part, some people are really good at that, right? So you spoke about these celebrities. These are clearly people who've been able to get what they want. I deal with a lot of business people like that. I deal with CEOs. These are people who are good at taking action, good at setting goals, good at achieving their goals. But what's fascinating to me, is why so many of these people are not as happy as you think they'd be. And even when we know this, we still, I teach this and I still have this sense, well, if I made, another $1 million, or if I made this, or if I did that, if I got, it's so ingrained in us. And I think it's probably an evolutionary drive. It's why it's never enough. It reminds me of Norman Mailer was talking to a fellow author, and the author said to him, they were at a cocktail party, and this guy walked in, he said, that guy made more money last week than you've made out of all your best-selling books. And Norman Mailer turned to him and said, yeah, but I've got one thing he doesn't. He said, what is it? He said, enough. Right? And the truth is, it's never really enough. And I'll bet if Norman Mailer was really honest, he'd say that he still wants another bestseller, right? And it's kind of okay, because I think that's kind of life. If we didn't do that, we would still be in chaos. It was saying, hey, we want more. We want a nice house. We want a big house. We want a building. We want to get to the sky. We want to get to the moon. And now we want to get to Mars. I love all of that. So fine. I'm not dissing that. Don't think that is going to make you happy. Now, that might sound like some sort of little spiritual homily, money doesn't make you happy, whatever. This isn't a spiritual homily, my friends. Not that I mind spiritual homilies. That's not it. It is an absolute research scientific fact. It's why I give you a way to boost your happiness more than winning the lottery. if you just won the lottery, I couldn't compete with that. 6 months later, most people who win the lottery go back to the same emotional state they were in before they won the lottery. It's called a baseline level of happiness. We all have a baseline level. So you get the promotion, happiness does go up. It's true, by 20%. You think you're going to, but most people think it's going to stay there. Oh, if I get the promotion, my happiness will stay 20. It doesn't. In 6 months, it goes back down. Yeah. I'm going to get the money. Yes, it goes up, it goes down. I'm going to get the girl or the guy. It goes up, and then it goes back to where it was. Yes, even love, my friends. And then you don't, here's the good news. You don't get the job, it goes down for 3 to 4 months, 3 to 6 months. You don't get the, it goes down temporarily. That's the upside of the downside. The downside of the upside is that you always go back to baseline. So there are very few things that sustainably boost the baseline. And that's why extremely wealthy people, you'll see, I was talking about somebody the other day about this. He mixes with extremely wealthy people. We're talking about billionaires, Saudi, Russians. He was working on yachts, and so he had a lot of engagement with these people. And he was like, man, and don't get me wrong, this isn't a gospel of poverty. I love money. I love the good that money can do. But so many of these people, you're just saying like miserable and pernickety and complaining and whinging, right? Because when you've got all these things, you have this expectation that everybody's going to be running around you, everything's going to be super perfect and everything. And life, doesn't matter how rich you are, certain things won't be perfect. And then you feel that more because you have this expectation that, you know, of entitlement. So, but yeah, I'm giving an extreme example there. You know, let's go back to these celebrities and what's going on here. I think the first thing to understand is that these things that you bring into your life are not going to, if you've got a mental health issue, the money is not going to solve it. You know, the guy or girl's not going to solve it. In fact, relationships can actually exacerbate it. So if you think you're going to solve your mental health issue by getting some material thing or person or having a baby, I love that. I mean, oh my God, yes, I'm depressed, I should have a baby. You know, we're mistaken. It's not going to, that's not going to do it. But we are deceived into thinking it will, and we all are. And again, it's probably an evolutionary drive. The brain figures just acquire, get more and more and more to protect yourself so that you can survive. And so it keeps on getting us to drive for more and more and more. And so, yeah, if you're struggling, that's not what it's about. You know, it's the work that we do on the inside. And, you know, this is going to sound like an episode of Oprah, but this is research from Stanford University, Robert Emmons. If you want to boost your happiness more than winning the lottery, bring gratitude into your life on a daily basis. Have a gratitude ritual. And there we see increases beyond the baseline. But I got ahead of myself. I think it's important for people to understand, why is this the case? We get desensitized quickly. So if you were still excited about your birthday presents for more than 6 months ago, that would probably prevent you from acquiring more, right? Which is what your brain wants you to do. So everything you become, psychologists use the term habituation. You become habituated to everything, every new thing in your life, new house, new car, new couch, was exciting for a bit and then goes back. And that's just this natural process. So when you understand that, you're not as disappointed. And I think what sometimes happens with celebrities and very wealthy people and CEOs, I think, is they acquire all of this. And firstly, many of those things bring additional stresses. So, you know, celebrityhood looks very attractive from the outside, you know, having everybody running around you and, you know, appreciating you and loving you and adoring you. But it has some downsides, like now you can't go out and you can't have your privacy. And, you know, and I know that sounds like shame, you know, let's bring out the violins. There's so many privileges. Yes, there are privileges, but there are downsides that most people don't think about until you have them. And then I think, the other thing is one's distress is exacerbated by disappointment. Like, damn, man, I was supposed to be happy. And then even guilt, like, what is wrong with me? Like, I've got everything that everybody wants. And I'm not happy. Is there something wrong with my brain? Am I defective? Am I just ungrateful? Yeah. And so there can be some self-recrimination about that until you realize those things don't increase happiness.
One of the big myths, I'd say, or expectations that I hear quite a lot, and an artist who did pass away through suicide actually wrote it on his Twitter before he took his own life. And it is the element of weakness, that when you are suffering with any sort of mental health, or you aren't, as ecstatic or happy as you should be, that you're weak. And so what he wrote on his Twitter, I believe, was, "I will return a stronger man. This time I was weak, but I will return a stronger man." And it's so interesting to me that although we're speaking about mental health, although we're speaking about all of these, really deep-seated issues, that people still have this very strong correlation that if you aren't mentally, as we'd like to say, strong, that you're automatically weak. So how do we change that paradigm, and how do we shift that kind of thinking?
Well, yeah, Ken, thank you for that. I mean, that actually put shivers down my spine. I will return a stronger man. I mean, sure, beautiful, and it's in a tragic way. And whether he meant that, as a literally or not, I don't know. I mean, if he meant it literally, I think the tragedy there is, I don't know what happens when we die, but the assumption that I am coming back is quite an assumption to make. The idea that I'm coming back as another man is quite an assumption to make. And I'm not sure that that's an accurate assumption. Maybe, yeah. I'm not actually quite sure how else to read that, but I think, one of the things that I remind people who are suicidal is that, it is your choice here. This is your choice. But don't make a choice, a permanent choice based on a temporary feeling. And I do think that's what often happens when people take their life, is that they're in a lot of pain in that moment, and that's the only solution that they can see in that moment. And of course, that's a permanent solution. Yeah, look, the idea of strength and weakness, I mean, it's kind of, what that means, like what is strong and what is weak? Is Vladimir Putin strong? Is somebody who acknowledges their shortfalls and works on themselves, is that weak? What is that? What is strong and what is weak? The thing is, these are labels that we decide. We decide. I guess you could say the ability to mass murder people and start war in a country kind of seems strong, but in some very real way, it seems incredibly weak to me. It seems incredibly weak. The idea that I have to go out there and destroy another country and destroy my own country to prove something about myself. That I am strong, which means that if you have to prove something in that way, then that suggests that you're actually very weak, right? And then somebody who's, say, struggling with anxiety and depression puts their hand up, and says, I'm struggling. I don't know, that seems kind of strong to me. The idea that you would be willing to reveal your vulnerability, a vulnerability that most people feel at some time in their lives, but very few have the courage to express. If that person expresses that, actually seems strong to me, So I think we need to question some of these words, strong and weak. If we all struggle in our way, I mean, everybody is struggling. You're not seeing the struggle on Facebook and Instagram, most of the time, but that struggle is there and it's real. And, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So in fact, acknowledging, the difficulty that you're in is what enables you to actually make a shift, go and get the help that you need, reach out to others. We know that one of the things that's absolutely critical to mental well-being is relationships. So if you're keeping this all to yourself, if you're hiding away from others, that's going to exacerbate the difficulty that you're facing. So it may take some strength to put your hand up, and say, hey, this is a struggle. for me, and I need some help.
Yeah. Oh, just we're coming to the end of our interview. So I have to ask you 2 questions, then we're going to wrap it up. The first one is, what does real success mean to you?
Yeah, I've always loved this this term, real success, and of course, Ken, that's Brian Welsh, the founder, who's just really done so much good in the world through giving people access to this information that has certainly changed my life, and I know that it's changed yours. And I remember when Brian was talking about changing the name to Real Success, and I think it's the authenticity behind that word real. That I think there's what is real. I mean, that's a question that requires a longer answer, but it's saying that we're going to focus on what is real. Having a bunch of brand labels on your back, and calling that success, that doesn't seem very real to me. And I think success, the word, I think became associated with a kind of glitzy, glammy. Listen, I don't mind glitz and glam. You and I can have fun with that as well. But the idea that if success is all about showing off your glitz and your glam and your labels, that seems like fake success to me. Personally, for me, direct question, for me, success is happiness. Success is happiness, and that's why I would say that somebody who has I've got a friend, in fact, we were talking about this the other day. She lives in a caravan on a river about 100 km outside Cape Town, surrounded by mountains. She's completely self-sufficient, grows her own vegetables. Her view is just unbelievable. And she, whenever I see her, she just puts a smile on my face, because she's always smiling and her eyes are aglow, and she is just clearly happy, And then, I know a billionaire, and he's got just anything you could possibly want, most incredible, magnificent homes, and endless cash, and I'm not saying he's particularly unhappy, but he seems kind of pretty ordinary to me in terms of his general well-being, and I look at these 2 people, and if you said, which one do you want to be? I mean, I would be my friend in the caravan on that river, in a flash. That's real success. Now, again, listen, again, money can be incredibly powerful. For me, Elon Musk would be an example who's creating real success. But if you ask me directly, success is your well-being.
Oh, I love that. And finally, what is something about Justin Cohen that we will not find on Google?
I mean, I want to be invited back, and so I've got to be careful here. What I reveal. Man, I suppose, having moved to Cape Town about 8 months ago, I've there's a whole kind of new world that's opened up, and one of them has been trance festivals. I've been to a few of those over the past few weeks, and that whole trance scene, of going out into this beautiful environment and dancing to music under a blue sky, the sun shining down, is one of my greatest joys. It brings me so much happiness, and you probably won't find that on Google. Well, now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Jess.
Thank you, Cand. It was a real pleasure.
That was such an incredible interview for me. And as you guys know, Justin and I do go back a long way, but I never stop learning from him. He's one of my ultimate mentors, and I hope that you learn from him as much as I have over the years. If you like this episode, I'm going to ask you again to like, share, and subscribe. And as usual, it has been my greatest honor to serve you this week, and I look forward to doing it again next week.